some of the biggest games that we can possibly play? And if we kind of create a circle and break these down into segments, of course, Philip would be at the top. But one of the things that makes a game big is playing as a species as opposed to a given country, a given race, a given nonprofit, a given role. So playing as a species. Another facet is 10x thinking. And the essence of 10x thinking, the potency of 10x thinking, comes from the fact that when you try and improve a system 10, 20, 30, 40%, it's going to be a refinement of an existing system. Because that's always the default. The neuronal pathways are already there. We're already looking in that direction. We've got presuppositions we don't analyze. And so it's like, how can we get this to work a little better? But when you look at something that's 700%, or bigger, you can't work within the existing framework. You've got to come up with something from scratch. And if we subscribe to the reality that 99.9% of everything that could be, of everything that is, of everything that is possible, is outside of consciousness. It's unconscious. It's in the domain of the unknown and the unknown, then one of the most important steps that we can take is leaping out of the familiar into 10x thinking. So this is another piece of playing a big game. Now, synergy is the phenomena where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, but not just greater in an additive fashion where you add a battery and you add a little bit of a wire and you add a tube and you add this little glass thing with a filament in it and you put it together like this and you add a lever and you turn the lever and you have light, and the light is bigger, meaning you have all those pieces and they do all add up to what they add up to, but the light is the synergy. And when we're dealing with synergy, we're dealing with an exponential curve as opposed to a linear curve. We're dealing with the design of combinations of pieces and combinations of individuals and combinations of ideas that exponentially release potential. So this is the third area in our circle of playing the biggest games that we can play. Now, within this domain, you have these probability fields that come from thinking in 10x, from looking for synergy, from looking at things as a species. You also, of course, have an even bigger synergy when you look at things through vision, through the idea of a timeless place, where we're not just looking at what fits into this moment, but we're thinking in a timeless way about the kind of reality, about the kind of possibility field and probability field for an entire species over time. It allows us to play certain games, as in the cathedrals of the Middle Ages that took hundreds of years to construct and are all the more awesome in the true sense of that word for us to encounter today. And so things that outlast the individual, I think is another facet. So these are the domains that I know that go into playing a big game, and we've only got maybe 40% of them, which means that the other components of playing a really great game are things that you may have considered, that others have developed and that I'm not aware of. Another that may come into play and in some numbers of years is artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is an exponential probability field. It's a synergy. It deals with the future, and it increases the range of possibility. With artificial intelligence, you have a probability field that includes exterminating the species in a matter of minutes, and includes a transcendent partnering with the species. So you have a wider field of possibility and a wider field of probability with artificial intelligence because it moves exponentially faster. It transcends the pattern recognitions we're able to hold. And so there's an interesting, dance there. And so that's going to be an important area to explore. So here we have a field. We have a direction. And the question is, what technology? Now, technology in the very basic sense, language is a technology, thinking is a technology, movement is a technology, emotions, biology, robotics, web pages, internet, what technology is going to catalyze this potential? And there's a couple of levels of this that I see. One of the most potent builds on Ray Dalio's work in his book called Principles. And what he's done in the development and growth of one of the most effective hedge funds in the history of investing is develop decision-making technology that is both participatory and in partnership with technology. In other words, he's developed an app that measures the competency of each person on the team in their given area based on internal and external metrics. So the more successes a given individual creates in a given area, that's one indicator of competency. Another is feedback about given areas of expertise from people around, and another is literal technological training. A degree in chemistry is obviously indicative of a higher likelihood of knowing about chemistry than zero training and degree in chemistry. So the first part of the app ranks people in specialized areas of competency. So what does that mean? Well, if you're the best omelet maker in the history of humankind, it doesn't mean you know how to drive a 4x4 or to fly a radio-controlled plane, and vice versa. And so the idea that competency is generic is false. And there's often a tension between someone being the best in the world at something, let's say playing the piano, where they study hours every day and thus achieve that level of competency. But precisely because they study hours every day, they don't know anything about dating. So the more specialized in expertise, in many cases, the bigger the gaps in expertise in some other areas. Now, there's some areas where we know this, like we don't assume that a brain surgeon is going to be good at dating, and we don't certainly assume that someone who's good at dating is going to be a competent brain surgeon. But there's other areas where it's, we don't seem to be able to make the connection that someone who's good at acting might not be a good president of a country, and vice versa. Because acting, a lot of our cues come from things like competence or confidence. Confidence as a substitution for competence. So if someone is a good actor and can give us the cues, the white coat, the stereotypical, archetypical expression of that role, we are not so convinced on an instinctual level that that person isn't a believable doctor. And so this is an area that we're a little bit more confused. And so ranking an individual by competency and 1 to 10 how competent in a very specialized area is the first part of a successful decision-making tool. Because if you're making a decision, like I'm a landscape designer, and determining the scale of this garden, you can see that we've got a 15-foot scale here. And this 15-foot scale is in context with a number of other masses. And someone who understands principles of design is going to make that decision more competently. And so, you could ask 100 different people and get 100 different opinions on whether or not should we add a rose right here? And a lot of people don't even know the context upon which to make that decision. That you can't actually answer that question intelligently without knowing a lot more data. How hot is the location? Are there deer there? Will the client spray deer away pills, et cetera, et cetera? And so what you want is decisions to be weighted proportionate to competency, so that while everyone may have an opinion, which is fine, everyone does not equal that or influence that decision equally, but rather that there are certain thresholds of competency that if you don't have that, you don't participate in that decision. And then there are other areas where there's a mix of competency and, someone that's highly competent would have 80% of the impact in that decision, and other people's with some degree of competency would temper it. And so this is what Ray Dalio's done with his app, is ranked things based on competency. Now, the next thing is that every aspect of the decision or of a decision is voted on transparently. So everyone makes proposals, and the app ranks the proposals in part based on competency. And people vote, and as they vote, depending, first of all, someone that has no design and aesthetic sense whatsoever wouldn't even get a vote on, shall we have 3 of these plants or 2 of those plants. But people that are involved, who will be affected, people who use something, a bit of technology, they would be highly competent to decide whether it would be good for them, would make their days efficient. So this decision-making technology beginning with a competency ranking and continuing with a real-time voting process, which then lets the app spit out a decision that, based on the weight of each person's competency and the vote and the intensity, 1 to 10, how important a person thinks that a given decision is, that it will spit out a decision. And that this decision, partnering with technology, will be substantially more potent than a decision that is, just made by consensus, as an example. And so the technology is creating a framework for guiding decisions. So this is, I think, one of the most important games that we can set in motion, is creating something. Dalio hasn't released this to the public. Creating something that would allow a group of people to make decisions using this model. Now, this is revolutionary. It can change all of our lives dramatically in becoming more aware as individuals about where our competencies are, which in turn can lead to a response to develop more competency in areas that we need to be effective. But it also, I think it's an intelligent model for decisions that we can understand. I mean, I don't want to be making a decision on the design of a nuclear power switch when an electrician has a strong opinion about the appropriate switch. I may have an opinion, but I don't want my decision to trump or equal or cancel out the decision of a competent electrician, given that the goal is success, not for us all to feel included, and that it is a big failure for a nuclear bomb to go off. But we all were very happy that we arrived at a consensus on a poorly designed switch. So this is a technology. And with that decision-making technology, it spits out projects. What is most important for us to be focusing on? And I want to talk about a few things that I think are significant. I think one of the most important technologies and protocols to develop worldwide is connecting and attuning with an individual or a town that's in trauma, that has PTSD, that is dealing with self-destructive crisis, that is overwhelmed, that is unable to cope and engage effectively with reality. And to turn that situation from deteriorating meltdown, from an escalation and a contagion, a viral spreading of that trauma, which happens, when an individual becomes so overwhelmed, whether it's with self-hatred or crisis or uncertainty, that they commit suicide, that they pick up a gun and start shooting people, that they sabotage an industrial piece of equipment, the trauma spreads. And now more and more people have the grief, have the trauma, have the guilt and uncertainty that was uncontained. It's a viral pattern that has been uncontained in an individual, so it's spread out. And so this is a very potent thing to know how to do effectively and efficiently, because it's something we're likely to have to deal with in ourselves at one point in a lifetime, and in a family member at one point in a lifetime, in a school, in a business. And if we do it well and transform as a group and as an individual, as a community, as a culture, in the way that's necessary to do that well, we integrate and we grow. When we fail and pain and trauma and fear spreads, then there is a wasted opportunity. And it's not that there's failure, because stuff often comes to light and we learn things and we respond things when pain reaches a certain point. So it's not a failure, but it is a crisis. And it's not as efficient as doing so gracefully. So this is another technology. And one of the most important preparations that we can do for a science-based culture and technology that's focused on well-being is gather nuanced metadata about our species so that we know, through the process of creating encrypted metadata, stuff that we might not feel comfortable sharing alone, but in the encryption of metadata, that we are comfortable sharing. And as a result, we learn things as a species that can allow us to look as a species, number of deaths on the planet, number of deaths to cancer on the planet, look at trends for every important element of our species evolution. In order to do this, in our current framework of technology, everyone needs a smartphone. Everyone needs periodic connection with a data stream, wired or otherwise. And everyone needs an app, as well as the awareness of the responsibility that it's one of our most potent responsibilities as a species to educate each other and the world as a species through this technology, and to study and learn patterns by region, by community, by town, etc. And I think this is one of the greatest humanitarian goals that we can attend to as people interested in the future and development of a species, is to be able to look at these trends. Now, these trends are incredibly potent. They're incredibly valuable. They can change the world in so many ways. And what's needed in many ways is a platform. Is a platform of wealth, a platform of well-being, a platform of blockchain-type integrity, a platform upon which module upon module upon module of data and best practices correlated with well-being can be developed, can be open-sourced, can be translated, so that we move towards a data-based planet in which we can anticipate and respond and regulate flows of energy to decrease unnecessary suffering in the most efficient and effective ways, and increase well-being, joy, presence in the most potent ways. This is a seed. It's a doorway. It's a seed in a doorway that I invite you to join me in developing, in opening up to as a meme, in feeding, in tending to, like any fragile possibility that holds enormous potential but begins as the smallest of children. It's so much care and attention and love to join me in tending this probability field, this possibility field. I want to thank you for your time, for your presence, for your love, your curiosity, and your enthusiasm for some part of our future, of our possibility as a species.